the Wilmington story might get lost out there in translation, especially when you look at, things like business development or company recruitment. What kind of story are we telling about Southeastern North Carolina, and what kind of story should we be talking about for Southeastern North Carolina? I think that Wilmington is uniquely poised with a lot of natural resources, the Atlantic Ocean, Cape Fear River, Brunswick River, Neuse River, all the tributaries and all the coastal lands that we have here. And I think that there is a desire for people to have this work-life balance. But I think that people who are running companies understand that it's really hard to attract and maintain and retain really good talent. And I think if you can talk about the story of how you can bring clean industry, clean technology, clean business to Southeastern North Carolina, and start to build those market segments that people are going to start to cluster around, I think that's the story that we need to start telling, with a focus on sustainability and environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, those types of things. There's a lot of conversations that need to happen for those kind of big initiatives to kind of gain traction across multiple player bases.
Time for another episode of the Cold Star Project, the podcast about the unexpected challenges of scaling businesses. And I've got a guest here. We've been waiting to talk for some time, had some back and forth, so it's cool to have him here. It's right before Christmas, too, when we're recording this, so I appreciate you being here. My guest
Merry
is
Christmas.
Yes, thank you, and to our viewers and listeners.
Happy holidays.
So it's Sean Ahlum, and Sean is currently the Vice President of New Product Business Development at the Ability Network, and we'll get into that a little bit. It's healthcare compliance kind of organization, but he's also the founder of seaCreatively consultancy, and he's from the town that I've been in 9 out of the last 10 years, Wilmington, North Carolina. So the C in front is the ocean, SCA Creatively Consultancy. I got recommended to talk to you, Sean, because I was digging into Tek Mountain, which is a tech incubator co-working space in Wilmington. For those of you who've watched my interviews with Derek Schmidt, he is a guy at Tek Mountain, and also one or two other folks that I ran into there. And the neat thing is, Sean, I was able to be in we actually shot at Tek Mountain in one of the boardrooms for these, so that was pretty neat. So you spent 4 years as a senior director, among other roles, of innovation at Castle Branch, which is I believe it's a banking organization that owns Tek Mountain.
Castle Branch is a compliance management company. Okay. They do criminal background checks, drug tests, immunization tracking, those types of things. And they have a specific niche in the healthcare industry, working with allied health professionals. So you think rad techs, medical assistants, nurses, those types of things, to do their compliance for when they go into their clinical rotation.
Okay, good deal. So really I wanted you on mostly, for our local Southeast North Carolina folks who watch and listen, but I guess other folks will get value out of this because you have some community management experience with Tek Mountain, and that had quite some energy going for it for a while. It was kind of neat because I got here in 2009, was allowed to work in the U.S. in 2010, and there was nothing. There was just nothing like that, and the energy level in the town was low and the recession was on. And so I watched it come up, and Tek Mountain appeared and it has become a hub of innovation in that. So tell us about what the state of business development is like in Southeast North Carolina today.
Yeah, I think it's pretty young still. Having had the pleasure of being able to travel to innovative ecosystems across the United States, and then, seeing all the good that, like when an ecosystem is put together properly, all of the good things that kind of flourish out of that. I think Wilmington is super young in that process. I think there's so many different players that need to come together in order for like an innovative ecosystem to kind of kick off and actually start churning out, profitable businesses. I think it's not just the public sector, like government. You have your government agencies, you have your educational agencies that need to play into that. Your chamber that needs to have some work involved in it. Publicly traded or privately held companies have a responsibility in that area. And then, the entrepreneurs themselves have an area. I would say right now that Wilmington has a lot of people who are in that entrepreneurial mindset, but I don't think that they are clustered around any one kind of market segment. So I feel like it's very fragmented, so to speak. There's a couple areas that are kind of taking off, and I like those areas. I think right now the financial technology area and what Live Oak Bank has done in that area, spinning out companies like Encino, which will eventually spin out other companies as they are successful and reach their ultimate goals. But, I don't really see a lot of other areas around those types of like market verticals like financial technology. I think I see a couple of areas that have a great bit of potential. And I just don't know if we as an organizational unit, meaning the community of Southeastern North Carolina, have actually recognized that and are able to capitalize on it.
Okay. So what startup support do you see available in the area, or is there any, or is it like kind of good luck, you're on your own?
Well, number one, there's some really fantastic entrepreneurs in the area that have been successful. So if you think about like, the Chip Mahans and the George Taylors of the world, they're here, they're available. There's a host of C-level retired executives that live in the area. Most of them have come here for retirement purposes or family purposes or things like that. So, I think those are the resources that are, available to people that are kind of out there. But for the most part, entrepreneurs are sort of on their own here. And it takes a connector. I think, Jim Roberts with Whale and New has done a good job of connecting people throughout the state, but really has struggled, like most of the people, to bring those resources back into Southeastern North Carolina. Diane Durant's over at the CIE is doing a fantastic job and maintains a good a good arsenal or bullpen of mentors for companies. So I think that's pretty fantastic. I think, that we have the normal resources that are available to a lot of different companies, like a Small Business Technology Development Center, SBA is here. So there's a bunch of activity for you to get involved with if you want to. But I think one of the things that I see that's majorly missing is those big industry, kind of clusters that are here in the area that are saying, if you look at like outside Indianapolis or outside Detroit, when the car industry was huge, right? All of a sudden you had this proliferation of other industrial type of startups, whether it was for seatbelt technology or radio technology in a vehicle or whatever they are. And those things built around sort of like that automotive industry. If you look just up the road to Greenville, South Carolina, you'll see BMW and then Michelin, right? So like those big kinds of things are happening, but they're around in like big industry clusters.
Okay. And the closest thing, Wilmington's got to that is maybe GE, maybe some pharmaceutical.
Yeah, I think some pharmaceutical. We have had a pretty good successful run of some pharmaceutical businesses. I don't think that they've been like what I would consider a true startup in terms of repeatable, scalable business model. I see a lot of really good service-based companies coming out of that area. Pharmaceutical, marketing or whatever it is. And then those types of things are services-based that like another pharmaceutical company can plug into and utilize it as a third-party resource for them. So, but I don't necessarily see like that, like game-changing, disruptive, like kind of company coming through and changing the landscape of Wilmington right now. But, the thing is that we do have a number of really great assets. So, you talked about the pharmaceuticals, PPD is obviously what comes to mind here. We do have GE, which is big. And then, there's also Corning, which makes the majority of the world's fiber optics here, and then another plant here in North Carolina, and the Gorilla Glass, which, I'm utilizing right now on my iPhone. So all that stuff is, has opportunity to come from these areas. We also have a pretty robust state port system. Pretty interested, we see some companies around that, like Megacorp Logistics and things of that nature that come in and kind of help, coordinate the transfer of goods across the globe. So I think that there's other areas that are ripe for kind of those industry clusters, so to speak.
Okay. And you mentioned the CIE, the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at UNCW. Yeah. That's an area that's been pretty good. I've seen a few directors go through there. There's a fellow named Jonathan a while ago who got sucked up by the banking industry, unfortunately, and he was pretty good.
Well, yeah, but see, that's the way it works, right? Like the university is supposed to be your fountain of talent and your fountain of intellectual property. And Jonathan was both of those things in one, and ended up going again to the spin out of Live Oak Bank, which is now Encino, which I think will eventually spin out. So I think that those things are good for our area and our industry. I'm really interested. Before I left Tek Mountain, we started a relationship with New Hanover Regional Medical Center, their innovation center. For good or for bad, whatever the public thinks about the hospital's kind of trajectory of where they are, whether the county owns them or whether they sell to a private organization. I think that they're doing the right thing in laying the foundation for innovation and looking outside the normal four walls of the regular hospital system to solve some of these major issues in healthcare. And I think, if they can kind of figure out how they can support that, one of the biggest things that's missing here in Southeastern North Carolina for these startup organizations is access to capital. But I think, once you have good people running good companies that solve a really true industry need and pain point that's identified in the marketplace, then I think the capital will follow that. So,
okay. I appreciate your frankness in that, because you're echoing some of the ideas that I've had for a while, and I've gone, is it just me? Am I being kind of a Debbie Downer about this area? But there is good stuff going on, but there are missing chunks, as you pointed out, that I'm glad to hear you comment about.
And it's not anything negative about the area. It's just young and nascent. I mean, look at Austin, Texas now. It's probably one of the biggest, invested in areas, or even like a Boulder, Colorado, or what have you.
Right.
It just takes time for, the idea of new company development to coalesce around certain industry segments. And then once that happens, then the financial capital will follow through.
Right. Yeah, and there has been a huge increase in the size, I think, of UNCW and the number of students and student housing in the 10 years that I've been in this area. That this city has changed quite a bit.
For sure.
Let's see. Something I noticed about your education, which was interesting, was you got a post-degree certificate in responsible board governance, which is unusual, and I like that. Then you had some experience on the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce member board of directors for a couple of years. Was that certificate helpful there? What kind of experience did you have with it?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce was a fantastic board. That was one of the best run boards I've ever been on. I actually got that post-degree certificate in responsible board governance because I was a board of director for an international nonprofit organization called Surfrider Foundation, which, I ran the local chapter for, since
a million years,
1997 to 2014. So, that was a long time. And that organization has got strength now and has continued to grow and has been pretty influential in things like, public policy. I mean, the fact that we have a line item in our county and city budget for sewer maintenance and repairs directly responsible for the work coming out of some of the people involved in that organization, and the attention that we brought to a crumbling infrastructure in the early 2000s. And so you can't continue to build on a shaky foundation. And so, I think, some of that is starting to play out now. Wilmington, in my mind right now, is undergoing another amazing growth spurt, like another growth phase, similar to what I recognized that I saw. I was a lot younger then, but what I recognized that I saw between 1998 and 2008, I think, we're in a similar trajectory currently in city development, county development.
Hey, this is Jason Kanigan, the host of the Cold Star Project and the founder of Cold Star Technologies. I've decided to do something new. I've started doing daily update videos on who I met and what I learned the previous day in the space field. And it's a great sort of follow me thing. You can learn what I learn. I'm meeting a heck of a lot of people and learning a lot of things really fast. And the space field is really disparate. There are tons of nooks and crannies to go into and explore, from legal, operational, regulatory, compliance, and gosh, the end customer. Who'd have thought about that, right? So you can sign up for this if you go to coldstartech.com/MSB, that's short for Make Space Boring, the mission we're on, then you can sign up, and in your email you will get a daily notification that the new video has been posted. I'm also thinking about doing some branded mini courses and summarizing papers as I'm able to. So those will be some goodies that are in there as well. So if you're interested in that, go to coldstartech.com/MSB and join us on the mission to make space boring. Now back to the interview.
But the chamber was fantastic. You know, I think, you know, we got to host a major golf tournament here, which brought a lot of international attention to the city and to the area. I think that one of the nice things that I saw for the first time in my adult life living here is that the surrounding counties kind of all banded together under a singular effort, and I thought that was pretty fantastic. And you know, work together to begin to tell our story on a you know, in a more scalable way. I think that the Wilmington story might get lost out there in translation, especially when you look at, you know, things like business development or company recruitment. You know, what kind of story are we telling about Southeastern North Carolina, and what kind of story should we be talking about for Southeastern North Carolina? You know, I think I have my own personal ideas, but I think as a community and as a multiple county effort, I think that, you know, a lot of people need to come together around the table a lot more often than what they do to have that conversation.
Well, I'm curious what that story is for you. Tell us about that.
You know, I think that Wilmington is uniquely poised with a lot of natural resources: the Atlantic Ocean, Cape Fear River, you know, Brunswick River, Neuse River, you know, all the tributaries and all the coastal lands that we have here. And I think that there is a desire for people to have this work-life balance. But I think that people who are running companies understand that it's really hard to attract and maintain and retain really good talent. And I think if you can talk about the story of how you can bring, you know, clean industry, clean technology, clean business to Southeastern North Carolina, and start to build those market segments that people are going to start to cluster around, I think that's the story that we need to start telling, with a focus on sustainability and environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, those types of things. I think we're pretty progressive here in Southeastern North Carolina, in the Wilmington area. I think it gets a little bit more conservative politically as you move outside of the city limits. And so, I mean, there's a lot of conversations that need to happen for those kind of, you know, big initiatives to kind of gain traction across multiple player bases.
So, but it could be an exciting time that we're getting into.
I think so. I mean, you know, just look at Wilmington, look at the population explosion in the last, you know, 3 years. It's been unbelievable.
Right. Yeah. That traffic up and down those streets. I mean, boy, it has changed a lot. So you founded your consultancy, seaCreatively, about a year ago. What's the mission for the consultancy, and who's your ideal client? Where do you want to take them from and to?
Yeah, so I formed my consultancy because I started working with a client. You know, I like to work with people who are digitally transforming their business, but also have a connection to a larger industry. I personally think that entrepreneurship is really successful when there is an identified need from a larger corporate entity that potentially will be your exit plan. And this organization that I've been working with, fantastic group of people, solid business, have been a services-based business for some time, but have collected a lot of data over a period of time, and allowing them to actually operationalize and processize their kind of go-to-market ability that they currently had through a services-based business. To do that in an electronic platform has been very helpful for their organization, but also recognize that, hey, it develops a whole nother company and a whole nother bit of scalability that we didn't realize that we had. We don't now necessarily need to grow through people. We can grow through this intellectual asset that we've created, and this technology asset that we created. And, you know, it's got multiple buyer sets into it. And so I like to look for companies like that are really excited about, you know, opening themselves up to re-looking at their process, that actually have a clearly articulated vision for where they want to go, and are able to make the investment that it takes to kind of build these things, and then leverage that new technology or asset into potentially a growing, scaling company, or into a sale into a larger organization, I think. And that's what I like to do. I still like to work with the smaller startups. I think a lot of startups just don't even know how to have that conversation, how to brand or market themselves, or how to raise money or capital, or even what the process of starting a company is. I think that's always really interesting. I like to do a lot, like I have to really, really like the business to want to do that work with them at that early stage. It becomes down to a personal relationship at that point in time. And then, I look at it, my consultancy, which is seaCreatively. My initials actually spell SEA. So one of those things my dad did for me when he named it. But it's kind of a play on words. I want people to see their process creatively, bring a different perspective into it. Organizational change is hard. It's super hard, and to commit to it over the long haul, the companies that do it and commit to it are, they reap the rewards over a period of time. They don't necessarily see the ROI in terms of, bookings or revenue in the first 3-4 years. But, the learnings, the innovation accounting that I like to talk about, and those things can teach a lot of things, not only about your startup business, but also can shine and focus areas on your actual business that's on your, I don't want to call it your cash cow, but that, that section of your business that generates all your revenue, that allows you to do these experimental things. Sometimes when you start up another company or a product line inside your company, you start to see these places where you might have been doing things the same way for a really long period of time. And this process allows you to refocus and say, oh, is that really working for us anymore? And what are the positives and negatives if we try something else here? How do we measure that? How do we incrementally move these ideas into a small subsection of my business so I don't disrupt my entire cash flow process? Or, how do I start to ingrain these skill sets and mindsets into the corporate population as a whole, so that everybody starts thinking like, oh, well, just because it's been done this way doesn't mean we should have to go forward and do it that way. It takes a really good, psychologically safe culture to accept those types of things and to actually leverage them and capitalize on them.
Cool. Yeah, process improvement is a big part of what we do. And what you say there about being willing to look at a process and go, look, just because we've done it this way until now doesn't mean that we need to keep doing it that way going forward, or that it's the best way. And that may sound simple or straightforward to listeners and viewers, but out there in the real world, that's usually how it happens. Inertia just keeps rolling. And so it's great that you're out there helping businesses that you believe in to make that change. Now,
you got to think about it also from, like, if you're a CEO and you've taken investment money, you've got shareholders that you have to answer to, or if you're a publicly traded company, the world is your shareholder, right? So like you have to answer to those people all the time, and it can be really challenging to balance that, like, need to increase shareholder revenue. I got to continue to grow my bookings if I want to go for my next round of funding or whatever it is, right? That, you don't want to, like, totally disrupt that piece of your business, but like, if you keep going down that process and you don't ever change, you're going to end up being the next Xerox or Polaroid or whatever it is that went out of business, or, Blockbuster Video or whatever it is. So. Right.
We see this a lot where companies with that shareholder requirement, they, in the short term, say that they're going to commit to some sort of evolutionary process, and as soon as those quarterly revenue targets get close, they just drop everything. It's like they drop their spear and shield and start running and discounting their pricing so that they can move enough units so that they can hit those targets. And then they go, whew, but then without that commitment, they're going to stay the same and shrink and shrink and shrink, like you say. So.
Absolutely.
What has been your experience? This podcast, when I started it 97 episodes ago as of today, it was about the unexpected challenges of scaling businesses, and I've since focused on space as well, space companies and that. But just in general, everything that I say and look at and talk about applies to any kind of business, because all businesses are the same at their core. What have you found that is the biggest challenge about scaling these small businesses? I see a lot of lifestyle type businesses in Wilmington where the founders, it's a sole proprietorship probably, and they don't want to scale. And then you get a few usually tech-based companies that want to do something, but they don't know how. And I think that's more what we want to talk about. And then and then there's the skyscraper level, PPDs of that have done it already, and they have that curse of knowledge, so they've forgotten what it's like to be that small, I think.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
What has been the biggest challenge to scaling that you've seen?
I think it's actually finding your true customer and understanding what that customer's pain really is. I mean, anybody can create an app today. I mean, you can go out and, it's cheap, $15,000, $25,000 and build an app. That's a lot of money to a lot of people, but like in the grand scheme of building a business, that's the cheap part. But then like really understanding the customer and understanding, because, once you build that app, you got to sell it. Right. And then that's the piece that really and unless you know who you're trying to sell to and you understand what their true need is, it could be like, that's your marketing messaging. That is your who you're targeting for a persona. That's who you're trying to convince to buy your product over a period of time. And and certainly I'd like to think that people all make decisions logically based. Like I wish I'd made all my decisions logically based, but it's really kind of like when somebody makes a purchasing decision, there's a lot of an emotional component to that. So understanding the psychology of what's going on in that person's world or that business's world, that problem is that they're trying to solve. There's the factual based side here, and then there's the emotional based side here, and being able to understand your customer from both levels. I think that's where a lot of I see startups start to falter and fail, because they get so in love with the product and the idea that they created that they're not listening to what the customer is saying to them. And then they end up like not getting the sales. And then, so therefore they don't see the revenue, their cost of acquisition of customer goes way up through the roof. And then when they go out to try to, because they're running out of runway, right? So when they go out and start running out of runway and they have these high costs of customer acquisition and not a lot of like revenue, and then all of a sudden, like, trying to close that gap with raising funds, it's all interrelated. And so when that happens, then all of a sudden they're unable to raise any more money, and then they kind of falter and they either go back to a lifestyle business or they fold up shop and try something else. And so I think that's really the number one thing that I see 9 times out of 10.
Okay. Being able to identify that ideal customer and realize it's not just everybody and find those pain points.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could look at the market, right? You have your total addressable market, and everybody always comes out with these. It's a $4.2 billion marketplace, right? But the serviceable addressable market might only be, $400 million. And then how many of that 400 million can you actually penetrate in as a company? So are you looking at 5% of that $400 million market? So that's a realistic revenue target. That's a realistic. And what does that 5% of that $400 million market actually look like, that so that you can go out and communicate with those people and identify them and bring them into your sphere?
And that does have a cost associated with it.
Totally.
Able to go get those folks. So the role that you're in now, there's some big data, machine learning. I don't know how much you personally have gotten involved with that, but I am curious about what you believe or what you see about machine learning and affecting the delivery of healthcare services. What has happened in the last few years lagged behind or exceeded expectations?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know how much of the expectation I had on what big data would play in the healthcare market. I think that it's really a nuanced marketplace, because, you have all these electronic medical records that are sitting out there. They're all proprietary. right? And then you have the government saying that they got to kind of talk to each other. So you have these like, interfaces where they're trying to get to this idea of interoperability, but do the electronic medical records really want to, does the Epic really want to be interoperable with the Cerner, with the eClinical Works, or what have you, right? And so now all of a sudden they're kind of fighting for their share of the pie. And so where do you go to get some of that data? And, I think that when I think about what I care about, I personally don't care what happens to my electronic personal health information, my EPHI. If somebody's going to use it and use it for good and make my life better, I'm okay with that. Now, if they're going to use it for something that's like nefarious and, create an alternative identity for me, I don't want that. But if I get into a car accident and I happen to be in Wisconsin, right, I want them to be able to immediately identify who I am and know all my allergies and all that kind of stuff about me. And we don't live in a society yet that's even capable. And we have a lot of people out there all like vying to be the first person that can do that and make that proprietary. And so I think that there's a little bit of a, there's a little bit of a challenge between like free commerce, the capitalistic society that our economic engine is built upon, and then like, the greater good of like people's health and wellness, and like where do the two kind of equilibrium out and balance out. And it's been really interesting for me to kind of watch that play back and forth in the marketplace. Certainly there's big players like Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway, and then Apple now is like starting to get into the electronic medical record business with the iPhone and like the Apple Health app. And it just is really interesting to me. So where I see it coming is, every organization is generating a big amount of data. And I think that data really can be moved and used in the right way by running like analytics or machine learning, whatever you want to call it, right? It's basically, hey, we have all this data, we've normalized it in some way that we can actually relate it back and forth to each other. And now what are the trends coming out of it? And can I get progressively better at identifying those trends quicker and quicker and quicker, so that, somebody who is showing these 3 symptoms, I can basically get down to the root cause of it faster and be able to provide them better health care because of that. And that's really what it's about for me. So I think the reason that I do what I do now is because I see the power that it's moving in that direction. I see us moving from a fee-for-service based healthcare system where, I get a cut and then it's like, how much did it cost to irrigate it? How much did it cost to be admitted in the ER? How much did each suture cost, right? To a value-based care. Did I not get an infection? Did I heal properly? Did I not have to come back to the hospital? Right, that value-based, that I feel like like I was well taken care of in the healthcare process. And then I think, as we move into that value-based care, I think it's going to be more and more important to track data over long periods of time amongst different care provider units. So from the, ambulatory into the acute, and then into the post-acute, and then into the home health type of side. And what I do now allows me like visibility into all those market segments, and then with the layer of the payer above it. So like, what's all the data that the payers have? How do we like start to look at trends and population trends of that, and start to provide products and services that actually help a physician identify somebody in their practice that maybe needs a little bit more help, that maybe needs a little bit more care and things of that nature. And so, that's what gets me really excited about what I do today.
You can't afford to be second best. You need to be first, and that requires speed. Now, if you're thinking that growth is supposed to be slow and steady, frankly, the way I was taught back in the 90s in the operations management and business administration programs, you are too slow. We have to adapt. And in space, it's no different than anywhere else. People like to think they're special in space, and it is fun, all the stuff we get to work on, but business is business. The fundamentals nowadays are conservative growth is not good. You need to run as fast as you can and risk outstripping your supply lines, which means in our world, using up the capital that we've got. That's a risk. But there is no prize for second place. There certainly is no prize for third. If you want to scale operationally fast, come talk to us at Cold Star Tech. We are the process experts for scaling fast. Now back to the interview. As soon as I hear about folks fighting for a piece of the pie, a bigger piece of the pie, I start to get nervous, because I've seen that in so many places in the past, particularly like well outside healthcare even. It can be in business and municipalities, wherever. If they can work together, they can actually expand the size of the pie. But the problem is people get territorial. And the biggest thing that I've seen up close in the Wilmington area is we've got HIPAA and the desire to anonymize data and that, but people don't want to share data outside of their organizations. That's what I've seen. There's a trust factor there, and even when they do trust you and know you, it still can be difficult to get them to say yes.
Yep.
What's your with that? I mean, okay, simple echoing. Is there anything that you've seen that can be done to make that smoother or make people happier about the idea? Because you definitely want them to share.
I think it's where you get the data from. I think, like, if you go into and you try to connect to every electronic medical record system from each practice to every hospital, you'd never get there. But there's, I think if you start to look at like a commonality of data where it's coming across, I think, and you look at it at a larger level, like a much like 120,000 foot level, I think all of a sudden you start to identify trends, and then you can start to put resources. Like, let's face it, there's a growing population of people that are obese, which leads to diabetes, right? And so what are the things, and certainly the insurance companies see that and they say, oh my God, it's so expensive to care for somebody long-term on diabetes. Insulin's expensive, the doctor's visits are expensive. All of a sudden now they got to go in and get speed exams. All I'm paying for all that now, right? And then, God forbid, should their kidney function go, now all of a sudden they're paying for dialysis for 5 to 10 years, right? That's not cheap. And so, all of a sudden, if the people who are driving the process say, oh, well, instead of paying, to be a reactive healthcare system, we start to be proactive and start to put our money towards wellness efforts. And we start to implement things like, activity-based learning and education type of activities, where people are getting up and walking and doing this kind of activity, or like diet, like, and flooding the area with, this is, we realize you're on a low income, but you know what? McDonald's is a lot more expensive than a package of collard greens and, and some, whatever it is that you're eating, right? You can make good, healthy green food and natural food and be actually cheaper than you were if you were to eat this, and start to subsidize programming like that on the front end, because now all of a sudden you're breaking that cycle and you're starting like, it's a proactive wellness model versus a reactive wellness model. And I think ultimately what I like to see is the data get to the point where we can start to isolate what these things are and start to put in that programming to be able to change that cycle in a different way.
Okay.
That's my pie.
Boy, that is very interesting. And creating a value instead of the cost accounting, like you were talking about, but a preventative value of, okay, this guy didn't get diabetes, and that saved us the potential of having to spend this enormous amount over the next 10 years or something.
Yeah, you would never erase 100% of the incidents, but even like say, 70% of people in this community are obese, or and out of that 70%, another like 50% develop diabetes. If you could just knock that number down 15%, think about the amounts of savings that you would have, from a payer's perspective. So.
All right. Sean, how can people get a hold of you if they're in the area and they're like, hey, I like what I'm hearing, I want to talk to this guy? Where should they go? What should they do?
Well, I'm always on LinkedIn, so I'm there. So my LinkedIn is just my name, Sean E. Ahlum. I am reachable through the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at UNC Wilmington. I do serve on a mentor board there. My time is pretty limited, so but I do try to get into meetings for companies that I think have really great potential, and I like to see that kind of be successful. I am out and about, so if the surf is good, you probably catch me over Masonboro Island or on the south end of Wrightsville Beach at some point. So if you see me on the street, just say hello. I'm always happy to stop and have a good conversation. And then last but not least, I'm also on all of the social medias that are out there, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today, Sean, and talking to us about business development and innovation in southeastern North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.